I've got Rabbi Lewis. We have to post this. This is just...
it's powerful.
It is so powerful. He says, looking for logic, looking for reason, looking for sanity. He's talking about what's happening over in Israel. Kafka on his darkest, gloomiest day couldn't keep up with this bizarre spectacle and we useful idiots, and how we pander and fawn over the cutthroats, sinking deeper and deeper into moral decay as the enemy laughs all the way to the West Bank and beyond. It's exhausting and dispiriting. We live in an age that is redefining righteousness, where those with moral clarity are endangered and a beleaguered species. Isaiah warned us thousands of years ago, woe to them that call day night and night day. We live on a planet that is both Clem and Sodom. I guess that's Sodom and Gomorrah. It is frightening and maddening place to be. How do we convince the world and many of our own that this is not just anti-Semitism, that this is not just anti-Zionism, but a full-throttled attack by unholy radical Islamists on everything that is morally precious to us? How do we convince the world and many of our own that conciliation is not an option, that compromise is not a choice? Everything we are, everything we believe, everything we treasure is at risk. The threat is so unbelievably clear and the enemy so unbelievably ruthless, how anyone in their right mind doesn't get it is baffling. He says next, let's try an analogy. Oh, you have to hear this.
Moment in the life of Barack Obama.
Sometimes I would put such questions to the people I met. They would respond with the same bemused look Reverend Phillips and Reverend Wright had given me. For them, the Principles of Trinity's brochure were articles of faith, no less than the belief in the resurrection. You have some good ideas, they would tell me. Maybe if you joined the church, you could help us start a community program. Why don't you come by on Sunday? And I would shrug and play the question off, unable to confess that I could no longer distinguish between faith and mere folly.
This has been Barack Obama with another moment in the life of Barack Obama on the Glenn Beck program.
I can't wait, because every day we get a little closer to his joining the Jeremiah Wright Church and seeing his conversion to a full Christian, from monkey god to full Christian. And it's really, really, really exciting.
It is. It is.
Okay. So, Jeremiah Wright, it's whatever. Let's go to some of the pastors and the preachers and the rabbis that are now speaking out finally and saying, hey, we got real trouble. We played a pastor a little while ago that said, you should leave your church. You should leave your church. If you're African American and they're telling you to vote for the Democrats, you should leave your church because they're with Satan. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty close. Now let me give you Rabbi Lewis, who is talking about what the world is facing now with radical Islam and what we're facing here in America. And he says, the threat is so unbelievably clear and the enemy so unbelievably ruthless, how anyone in their right mind can not get it is baffling. Let's try an analogy. If someone contracted a life-threatening infection, and we not only scolded them for using antibiotics, but insisted that the bacteria had a right to infect their body, and perhaps if we just gave the invading infection an arm or a few toes, the bacteria would be satisfied and stop spreading. Would anyone listen to that medical advice? Well, that's our approach to the radical Islamist bacteria. It's amoral, it has no conscience, and it will spread unless it is eradicated. There is no negotiation, and appeasement is death. I was no great fan of George W. Bush. I didn't vote for him. I'm still a registered Democrat. I disagreed with many of his policies, but one thing he had right. His moral clarity was flawless when it came to the war on terror. I know that there are those sitting here today that have turned me off, but I also know that many turned off their rabbis 75 years ago in Warsaw, in Berlin, and Amsterdam, and Krakow. I get no satisfaction from that knowledge, only a bitter sense that there is nothing new under the sun. Enough rhetoric. How about a little show and tell? A few weeks ago on the cover was Time magazine, a horrific picture with a horrific story. Photo of an 18-year-old Afghani woman, Bibi Ashana. who fled her abusive husband and her abusive family. Days later, the Taliban found her and dragged her to a mountain clearing where she was found guilty of violating Sharia law. Punishment was immediate. She was pinned to the ground while 4 men and her husband sliced her ears off, then cut off her nose. That is the enemy. If nothing else stirs us, if nothing else convinces us, let Bibi's mutilated face be the face of Islamic radicalism. Let her face shake up even the most complacent and naive among us. In the holy crusade against this ultimate evil, pictures of Bibi Ashah's disfigurement should be displayed on billboards, on every highway from Route 66 to the Autobahn, to the Trans-Siberian Highway. Her picture should be posted on the lobby wall from Tokyo to Stockholm to Rio. On every network, at every commercial break, Bibi's face should appear with a caption, "Radical Islamic savages did this," and underneath, "This ad approved by Hamas, by Hezbollah, by the Taliban, by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, by Islamic Jihad, by Fatah al-Islam, by the Muslim Brotherhood, by Al-Qaeda, and by CARE." The moral sentiment is the drop that balances the sea, said Ralph Waldo Emerson. Today, my friends, the sea is woefully out of balance, and we could easily drown in our moral myopia and our political correctness. We peer up into the heavens, sending probes into distant galaxies. We peer down to quarks, discovering particles that would astonish Einstein. We create computers that rival the mind, technologies that surpass science fiction. What we imagine with astounding rapidity becomes real. If we dream it, it does indeed come. And yet, we are at a critical point in the history of this planet that could send us back into the cave to a culture that would make the Neanderthal blush with shame. Our parents saw the swastika and recoiled. They understood the threat and destroyed the Nazis. We see the banner of radical Islam and can do no less. A rabbi was once asked by his students, "Rabbi, why are your sermons so stern?" The rabbi replied, "If a house is on fire, and we chose not to wake up our children for fear of disturbing their sleep, would that be love? Children, our house is on fire, and I must arouse you from your slumber." During World War II and the Holocaust, it was business as usual for priests, ministers, and rabbis. Did they deliver benign homilies and lovely sermons as Europe fell, as the Pacific fell, as North Africa fell, as the Mideast and South America tottered and England bled? Did they ignore the demonic juggernaut, the foul breath of evil? They did not. There was clarity, courage, vision, determination, sacrifice, and we were victorious. Today it must be our finest hour as well. We dare not retreat into the banality of our routines, glance at headlines, and presume that the good guys will prevail. Democracies don't always win. Tyrannies don't always lose. My friends, the world is on fire, and we must awake from our slumber. If your pastor, priest, or rabbi is not saying these things to you, ask them why. I was in Vegas over the weekend. I had to give a speech, and I told you this yesterday. My wife and I walk through, and I guess the same could be said for me when I'm on vacation, and, if people are in Vegas, they're on vacation or whatever. But I looked down at the pool in the hotel room, and it was just crowded with people. And then we walked the casino floor, and we walked into one of these huge malls. It was packed. And I said to my wife, how many people here really even know what's going on? Again, I understand vacation, and I understand getting away from everything. I get it. Boy, do I need it. I do it too. But how many of us, the person who's listening to the radio right now, in the car next to you, or the person who's in the cubicle across the office, are they really aware of how close we are to the edge of the abyss? I'm reading this book called Freedom's Forge. It's a great book, really inspiring. And it's about the people who built the engine for World War II. How did we go from a country that had nothing? The Democratic Party was isolationist. They wanted nothing to do with anything. They got rid of our war machine. We had nothing left. And finally, Winston Churchill, after begging FDR, you got to help us. You got to help us. The next step was for the Germans to go to Dunkirk. Everything had fallen, and they're ready now to get into boats and go over to England. Finally, Churchill writes, and he writes FDR over and over again. He begs him, you got to help us. And he finally writes him and says, our military is going to fall. Europe has fallen. There's nothing left. We're the last stand, and we will not be able to stop them. And I just want you to know, Mr. President, that our warships will be flying Nazi flags, and they will be on your shores, and you will not be able to stop them because you will be alone in the world. It was that letter that finally woke FDR. He didn't hate America. He just saw us differently than I do. But he didn't hate America. He wasn't trying to rebalance the world. He wasn't trying to put us in our place. He wasn't surrounding himself. He was surrounding himself with communists, but you have to remember, at the time, communists weren't looked on as bad. But he wasn't surrounding himself with Nazis. Nazis were not in the White House, at least knowingly. We have the Muslim Brotherhood in the White House being invited knowingly. The State Department being told, forget about he's on a terrorist watch list. Go ahead, let him in. He's a guest of the White House. Are you crazy? And meanwhile, our printing presses are running 24/7. There was a story I read today on Business Insider. One of the big investors said, this has got to stop right now. America, you're running out of time. You've got to stop the insanity on the presses right now. There is no going back soon. I give you that same warning. When it comes to the Muslim Brotherhood and what we're doing over in the Arab world, it's got to stop now. They are institutionalizing the Muslim Brotherhood in our Department of Homeland Security. You think Homeland Security is a problem now? They're not looking for the bad guys anymore. We can't name the bad guys anymore. Here are the bad guys. And we need a president that will actually say this from the Oval Office. The bad guys are Muslim extremists. Much of the Arab world as it is being ruled now by Muslim extremists, and these extreme clerics have taken Islam, a religion, and made it a murder machine. They are going to make the Nazis look like rookies. If we don't name evil and say it out loud and stare it down, it will grow in size. It is being institutionalized here. And now not only will they kill you, and they'll kill your neighbors, they will kill me and everybody else. And the voices like mine will be the first to go. And then, as Churchill said to FDR, when the ships are off your shore, when you're alone, who's going to stand with you? Who's going to do it? The time to stand now, and I'm not talking about going over and fighting them there. I'm saying, good God Almighty, get our troops out of the Middle East and shore ourselves up and have some moral clarity, for the love of Pete. Have moral clarity. They will kill you and me. They will destroy the West, our way of life. And just as they do when they were blowing up the Buddha statues over the weekend, or blowing up the Buddha statues in Afghanistan in 2001, or they're threatening to blow up the pyramids in Egypt now. They're burning down the Coptic Christian churches. They will erase us from history. You can't give them a few toes or an arm. It must be eradicated with the moral clarity that we had with the Nazis. And I'm sorry, gang, but you got a president right now that is saying, oh, you know what? It was a YouTube video. Excuse me? I don't care how democratic you are. You know that's a lie. You know that's a lie. Only clarity and adults are going to survive. People with clarity. Find some.